It reminds me of what we read in the book of Revelation. It talks about a man of sin whose number is 666. And spiritually speaking, that just means 6 is a number that's associated with man. Man was made on the 6th day. If you read in the Scripture, 6 is always a number associated with fallen man, with man less than God. And of course, this beast that's described in the book of Revelation, who gets this number 666, that means man through and through, spirit, soul, and body, inside and out, fallen man. And here's a representation of it, this giant who's got all these 6s associated with him, 6 fingers, 6 toes. It's very much the same kind of a thought. And he's a giant, and it means that he's he's intimidating. He can't be overcome. Okay, go back to Samuel, 1 Samuel 17, Phil. I read all that just to show you that there is a symbolic depth to this rather than just a story. Okay, let's see, verse 8. 1 Samuel 17, verse 8. Let's go on with the story. So this guy, this giant, who has got all these 6s associated with him, he stood and cried to the armies of Israel and said to them, "Why are you come out to set your battle in array? Am I not a Philistine, and you servants of Saul? Choose you a man for you." Listen to what he says here. Just choose one man. That's what he says. "And let him come down to me. And if he be able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall you be our servants and serve us." And the Philistine said, "I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." Now, twice now he said, "Just give me one man." And again, he ends this way, "Give me a man that we may fight together." And the proposition that this flesh man, this giant, sets forth is, if one man can defeat me, then the victory is won for everybody. He doesn't say, "All of you come and fight me all individually, one after the other." He says, "Just give me one man. And if one man can defeat me, then I'm defeated, and we'll be your slaves." But you know what? If you go on reading in the story, you know what happened? They all trembled in fear. Because you know why? They all knew they couldn't defeat him. They all knew they couldn't face this giant. They couldn't come up against him. However, there is a person in this story who was not afraid of the giant. He was able to face him. And his name is David. Now, sometimes we read this story of David and Goliath, and we try to make ourselves identify with David. Listen, David is not a symbol of you. It's not you go fight the giant. David is a picture of Christ, because you're not able to go fight the giant. David is not you. David is Christ, and he fights the victory. But notice, everybody else wins the victory if one man can defeat him. This is a symbol or a picture or foreshadowing of God's one-man plan through Christ. Let's look at this guy David, and when he goes, he hears about the giant, and he says, what is it the giant's been saying? And he says, basically, he says, "Let me at him. I'll go against this giant." And Saul tries to arm him with his armor, and David says, "I can't go with your armor. I have to go with my own weapons, my own skill." Okay, verse 45. Let's cut to the chase here. "Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee. And I will give the carcass of the host of the Philistines this day to the fowls of the air, and to the wild beast of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that God saveth not with the sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." It's a very profound thing he's saying here. He says it's not even a human thing. The battle is the Lord's, and he's going to give me the victory here. Okay. "And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, and David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine, David put his hand in his bag and took thence a stone and slang it and smote the Philistine in his forehead. And the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face into the earth." I think it's very profound that the giant is killed. The giant is defeated by something sinking into the forehead. You can easily imagine what that could spiritually have to do with a change in thinking, and that's where the thinking takes place. So he defeated him by a stone and going into his forehead, and so David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and smote the Philistine and slew him. And there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword, that is, the giant's sword, and drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And the Philistines saw their champion was dead, and they fled. Now, if you go on reading in the Bible, you find out that this sword of Goliath was very important for symbolic reasons. It was a trophy of this battle. And you can find out what happens to the sword. It tells where David left the sword. But you have to turn to Jewish traditional history to find out what happened to the head of Goliath. And this is very interesting. If you read traditional Jewish lore and history, it is said that David took the head of Goliath and carried it back with him to Jerusalem. And there was a place in Jerusalem called the City of David, and there was a hill there in Jerusalem, and the tradition is that he buried the head of Goliath. Remember, he is Goliath of Gath. Remember that? Goliath of Gath. And that he buried this head of Goliath, symbolizing, of course, his victory over this giant that nobody else could overcome. And I've told you already that this David is a type of Christ, defeating our enemy that we could never overcome. So David took the head of Goliath and he buried it on a hill, and that hill came to be called the place of the skull. Now, you know where that comes up again in the Gospels, because that's where Jesus was crucified. He buried the head of Goliath at the place, it came to be called the place of the skull. It also took the name of Goliath, Goliath of Gath, and it came to be called Golgotha from Goliath of Gath. Traditionally, now you can't find that in the Bible, but you can see how that makes a little bit of sense. But I think that's amazing, and that's fabulous that this symbolic victory of David, foreshadowing Christ, that this head of Goliath would be buried at the place where Jesus, many years later, would come and win for us the real victory, of which David just was a foreshadowing, and defeat the enemy that we could never defeat, which is the flesh. See, that's why Paul says in Galatians chapter 2, verse 20, I am crucified with Christ. What does that mean? I am me, the flesh person, the part of me that I couldn't overcome. I recognize I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless I live, yet not me, Christ lives in me. And the life that I live in the flesh, see, that's the part of us, the nature of the flesh that has been overcome and defeated by Jesus. The life that I live in the flesh, I live by faith of the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. You see, Paul doesn't say, I'm engaged in this never-ending struggle with the flesh. He says, I just embrace a victory that's already mine. That's why further on in Galatians he says, walk in the Spirit and you'll not fulfill the lust of the flesh. He doesn't say fight with the flesh. He says walk in the victory. Walk in the victory. You know, he doesn't tell you to go fight. He says you walk in the victory of a victory that's already won. Okay, that's all I got for you today. Let's all stand up.